Alright, part 2 of Troy's 1977 JMP. If you haven't watched the part 1 video, I'll put a link to it in the video right now. Here, we're going to go straight back to the bench and I'm going to take you through the changes that I've made to this amp. I'm going to do a bit of a play test for you through my greenback loaded Marshall cab here with a 57 on it, and the video will end with a guest appearance by Troy himself with the amp once he got it back in his studio. Okay, so let's check out the modded JMP. I am in the kind of, let's call it the stock mode, right? This is the 10K cold clipper. No diode clipping on. I'm running this into my old Marshall cab with a 57 on a greenback speaker. And here's the basic tone we're getting. Gains at about 3 PM. Mids and treble are about just above midday, about 1. Bass is similar, and I've got the presence up a little bit. This is the kind of these settings with the 25K presence pot with the 4K7 resistor to ground. You do find that the presence pot, the adjustment's really kind of at the end. If you notice this, the old Marshall, right? If your presence pot is kind of not really progressive all the way and it's really just at the end that you really hear it. That's by design. It's how those style of presence pots were wired, but just something to be aware of. You do need to crank the presence if you want it to have any effect. So let's bring this into the higher gain mode. You'll hear it pop. It's changing the cathode resistor setup of the second gain stage, and you get a lot more gain here. And we can bring the diodes in. Now this will drop the volume, so I'll adjust the master volume here to compensate. Here we go. Fun for days. Right, so here we are looking at the finished amp. I will go through these particular kind of areas of the mod in detail, right, with the camera kind of zoomed in, but I thought I'd just start here, give you a general overview of what's going on. It is still a 2203 in terms of architecture, so we still have a high and a low input. All of this is the same, right? The changes are effectively that you have on the 10K. This is normally the 10K cold clipper here, that's still there. But with the switch, one of the switches on the front, which is the kind of the lower gain, high gain switch, we parallel in this cathode resistor and bypass cap here. As I said, I will zoom in, right, so you can kind of see what's going on. We have, I've replaced this 470 picofarad here, which is part of the stock amp. Was way out of value. It was nearly 1 nanofarad. So I put that back to 470. This 1 nanofarad bright cap, the cap that was on there was also measuring about 1.5. nanofarad, so I've replaced that with a 1 nanofarad. There is a 220k resistor off the input of the gain pot here, which gets switched in when this lower cathode value comes in. When I zoom in on that, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So this 470 picofarad plate snubber here, which is on the plate resistor for the second gain stage. Bear in mind, right, this in these, V1B is the first gain stage, V1A is the second gain stage. And that 470 picofarad, you can put it across the 100k cathode resistor on the cathode follower here, which is how Dave does it, Dave Friedman. Sounds awesome. But when you've got the diodes going, and we'll talk about how the diodes are wired here in a second, I find that that cap that attenuates high end just gets a bit fuzzy. So when I'm putting diodes in like this, I won't put that across the 100k cathode resistor, right? So this arrangement down here, guys, we've talked about this a lot on the channel before. This is where we interrupt the link between the top of the 100k resistor on the cathode follower and the tone stack. Now, in a normal setup on a Marshall here, you've got that 100k cathode resistors normally on the board right here, so I have to take that out. And you can see with the copper that's on this PCB that it connects directly to the top of this 33k slope resistor. This is the part of the tone stack here, the treble, middle, and bass caps. And we need to insert our little arrangement here with the 10k resistor in this is a 0.22 microfarad coupling cap, so that we can then take this coax here from that same point. This is the connected to where this cap is connected, same part of the circuit, over to my switch here where I've got my diode set up. I've shown this before on the channel many times, right? This is my kind of hybrid clipping scheme. So if you look at how I added diodes to the origin 20, for example, it's exactly the same. What I'll do, rather than going through the schematic again, I'll just kind of show you how I've done it in terms of implementing it, right? Because you might find that more useful. The rest of the amp is pretty clean. I noticed that the phase inverter couplers were not matched, so there was a 0.022 microfarad here, which is original. This one had one of these yellow Phillips caps in it, and it was 0.1. So we had a mismatched couplers on the phase inverter. I have never seen that, ever. Right? So I sacrificed one of my new old stock mustards for Troy's amp. Good on you, Troy. And I threw that in there, right, to match these up. So Troy got one of those as a bonus. And what else have I done? Oh, the first coupler. Okay, the first coupler out of the first gain stage is now a 0.0022. So in a stock 2203, right? As we know, it's a 0.022 on both gain stages here. So changing the first gain stage to 0.0022, and I reused the mustard that used to be part of the depth circuit over here on this part of the amp, which I'll get to in a sec. I reused that and got that onto the board, so we've managed to preserve the mustard cap. I'll just move to the other end of the board and I'll quickly go through the changes there. Okay, so down here, I changed the presence cap. This was a 0.68 in the amp that I received. Some people dig it. I kind of don't. I find it kind of hollows out the mid-range too much for me. So I've put this back to 0.1, which is kind of more, well, what I'd consider a more standard Marshall. And I've got a fixed depth circuit here. So this is coming off the 8 ohm tap. You see me do this a million times, guys. 220k resistor, 470 picofarad ceramic in parallel. And that's the negative feedback line there, that brown wire, which is not original Marshall colours, normally purple. That's coming off the 8 ohm tap because this amp does not have an impedance selector. So what Troy wanted me to do was to set up these two jacks. One is 8 ohms, which is the one closest to the impedance selector. I will label it, Troy, but now that we're looking at the amp, you can go back and reference this, mate. This is the 8 ohm tap, okay, closest to the impedance selector, and furthest away this is 16, and so I've just hardwired the output transformer secondaries onto there, so no 4 ohm speaker jack not needed. So let's zoom in. Oh, I've got to tell you about one other thing in this amp. So Troy, I haven't mentioned this to you, mate, but I think you'll find this pretty fascinating. Well, I did anyway. Your amp, which is again being hardwired. So on the power transformer side, the Marshall have the voltage selectors here. This has all been disconnected, right? No longer in use. So someone has basically hardwired the primaries to the power transformer into the IEC jack. Now, I looked at the colors of this and I went, that's not right. And then I checked the voltages and I was measuring 7 volts AC on the heaters. Should be 6.3, guys. I'm sure you know. Then I checked the plate voltage and this thing was pushing out just over 500 volts on the plates, 505, which is not unheard of in Marshalls, but pretty high. Normally use 460, 470, around there somewhere of this era. And lo and behold, this thing was wired to the 220 volt tap. We're 240 in Australia, and these do have a 240 tap, right? It's the purple, and here's the purple here. So what we had is this blue wire, which is I've now kind of heat shrinked off and cable tied away. This blue wire here was connected to the mains fuse, so we were sending 240 volts in to a 220. We're sending 240 volts in to a 220 volt tap, and as a result, our voltages across the whole amp were up by 10% or more. And when you're talking about 10% of 450 volts, it's probably a bit more than 10%. This is how you get 500. It's not good. All right. So the amp will be a lot happier set up like this. Wasn't expecting that, but yeah, it was a good discovery. Let me zoom in on some of these changes so we can get a bit more detail on those. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the switch at the top here, which is kind of the low gain, high gain switch. It's switching in this extra arrangement here on top of the 10K. So your cathode resistor on the gain stage, right? So this is the gain stage. It's a second gain stage in the amp. This is the plate resistor here, 100K, the coupling cap. And this is the cathode for it. It's 10K. So this cap here and this resistor on the other side of it is the cathode and the bypass cap for the first gain stage. All right, so for the purposes of this part of the circuit, we're just ignoring that. On the 10K, what we do is we parallel in a 3K3, it's a 3.3K resistor, and this is a 0.68 electrolytic, 63 volts. Okay, you can use kind of any type of capper if you like. If you want to use a poly or whatever, no worries, it's fine. It doesn't need to be 30 volts or more. It doesn't need to be very high. You measure the voltage on the top of a cathode here. It's only going to be maximum 2-3 volts. So by parallel in that, what we do is we toggle the ground. Right, so this white wire comes to the other side of this 3.3K, and on my double pole, double throw switch here, I've got a ground. There's my ground in the middle, and that's the black wire, and I've grounded it at the same position on the board. So don't mess your grounds up. Don't just grab any old ground. Right, I'm switching the cathode resistor here. I want the ground to be at the same point. So I'm running the wire here back to there, and I'm using that ground as well because it couples straight into this gain pot to ground. Let me move the camera up a little bit. So I'm using that ground on the switch here also. This other white wire toggles in a 220K resistor which is on the input to this gain pot. So what this does is it attenuates the gain a bit and drops some bottom end out of the circuit. So there's a 1 meg gain pot, 220k in parallel. It drops the value in the circuit of that pot, and the impact of that is, well, try it. Try any value in here you like, right? Try 1 meg, try 470k, try 220. You do it by ear, is my recommendation. But if you find that even after you've changed the first coupling cap in this style of amp to 0.0022 and you still think it's a bit flubby, try this trick on the gain pot. You might be surprised how impactful it is. So the switch below it is my diode arrangement. Okay, and I'm only using, this is just an on-on switch. This is just an on-on as well, by the way. On-on, so it's either diodes in or out. I don't have like diodes out and then two different diode kind of types, whatever. These are quite high value Zenas, not low, so they're kind of, 20 or so. It's a 150k resistor. So that's actually set to ground. I have a schematic on my website where this is actually drawn up. You can see it. But that switch is toggling a ground just for the Zenas. So underneath that 150k resistor are two Zena diodes back to back under the heat shrink. And when the switch is on, they get a ground. The 150k is always grounded because it's the ground, which is this wire here, connects to the middle part of that switch. The Zenas to the bottom part of the switch. The top part of the switch has no connection whatsoever. So when the switch is down, like it is now, the Zenas get a ground reference and they come into the circuit and they connect up here at the top of that 100k, well, where the 100k resistor of the cathode follower used to be. And I'll just show you right now how I have now set up the 100k resistor, because it's been moved from here onto the tube socket. Okay, so let's have a look at the arrangement here. Again, so this 100k resistor, the normal cathode follower, cathode resistor, has come off the board. It's now gone down here. All right, so it's wired straight to the socket, and it's straight to a ground, which is the ground I'm getting here is off the filter cap. There's a filter cap, one of those big blue things, right? It's just sitting right here, and the ground side is right here. So I'm just got conveniently ground that right there. 10k resistor coming off the socket as well, and then here's our coupling cap here, right, which is blocking the DC. And one leg of this is mounted straight into the ST1 board where the yellow wire used to be. The yellow wire that used to run to that pin on the socket. And the other side of the cap is soldered to the top of that 10k. So that's nice and secure there. And by doing that, what we've done is we've set up a scenario here that allows for the Zenas down here to have an impact and actually voltage clamp your audio signal and give you that beautiful compression. Just one other trick here, guys. The standard Marshall, you'll see the wire. This is the treble pot here. This is the master volume. You'll see it come straight off the treble wiper to the input of the volume pot. Now, if you find that your volume is just kind of like, it's either off or just blisteringly loud, and the taper on the volume pot, in other words, is difficult to use, you can put a resistor here in series with the wiper of the treble pot. 220k is a good place to start. You could go as high as 470 if you like, 470k. Play with that and find, you don't want it so large that your volume won't allow you to access the full potential of the amp. But you'll find 220 or 330, 470, somewhere around there. Pretty handy addition again if you just want a little bit more kind of control in the lower volume parts of the circuit. Well, that's it, guys. I think I've covered the guts here, basic changes. I did kind of spend some time regrounding this amp So you can see the bus wire here is cut here, and the presence pod is grounded over at the phase inverter ground. And so, there's a good Lyle actually on Psionic Audio has a awesome video on Marshall grounding. So I definitely took some tips from Lyle in terms of doing this, and it just kind of, I think this amp didn't have a terrible hum, not at all. And I checked all the caps, choke, everything is fine. The tubes are perfectly balanced still, right? I put them all on my tube tester and they're perfectly fine. But there was still a little bit of a ground hum, and it is a lot better. Troy, I hope you dig the amp, mate. This is ready to be packed and shipped back to you in Perth, and hopefully it will be a really useful addition back in your studio. I'll catch you later, guys.
G'day guitar nerds, it's Troy Nababan, and I'm here with my amazing 1977 Marshall JMP that Jason at Headfirst has just modded. We're going to run through some tones, try the different gain switches that Jason's put on the front. I'm sure he's been through it already in the video. Yeah, we'll just see what it sounds like. I have my very standard Charvel San Dimas with a Duncan JB in the bridge, running into a vintage 30 cabinet with an SM57 and a Royal 121 on the speaker, on the best sounding speaker. So in its stock gain settings, it sounds like this. Sounds awesome. All right, I've just flicked on the Jakey Lee gain, so let's have a listen to what that sounds like. All right, I've turned the Jakey Lee gain off, and this is just the Jose by itself, the Jose gain by itself. All right, here's with both switches on at the same time. Cool. All right, back the gain down a bit, and I've turned the master volume up a little bit. I like to usually leave it around sort of 10:30, 11 o'clock, because to me it sounds the best around there. But this is what it sounds like, a little bit cleaner. I've also knocked a bit of treble off on the guitar using the tone knob there. That's all the way up. We'll just knock it. Jason, I love the way this amp sounds. Thank you so much for all your hard work, and I can't wait to use it on some sessions. Cheers.